who face eternity easily forget what a lifetime means, what an ending means.
You know it doesn't have to be this way.
No, Kunavine, it does. They need me.
You know, we're 17 days in now, and I really still feel like we're just warming up. And I'm just getting to grips with running this show each day and sitting down and having fun with you guys. It's amazing how fast the time flies. So, currently the topic is on the idea of dailies and what kind of reforms we might see to those over the End of Dragons era. But, as I said yesterday, today in particular, I want to do a special part actually looking at some news. There is some recent End of Dragons stuff to speculate and discuss. It's only about a month old, believe it or not. And it was over the Christmas period, so I kind of didn't look at it at the time. But I thought it might be fun, and in fact, I tweeted about it today. I need to get back into using Twitter regularly. I used to use it so much. So I actually have some screenshots and responses from you guys over there who had some good ideas about something I was completely stumped on. So yeah, let's run in. Now, the footage in the background, I think will largely be on the news. But wherever I do put gameplay, it will probably be me doing some strikes. Now, today I also produced a video about getting all my legendary gear done. And that was very exciting. My original idea for that video was to shoot it in the Cormyr library because it's very grand and prestigious and stuff, kind of fit the idea. So some of the footage you're watching for this End of Dragons Daily is me getting access to the library, playing through that story step again. In an equally gorgeous area. This is the place in the mists where we're at the desert and then it clears away and we're at nighttime there. Man, I always go back to Path of Fire and remember how amazing of a job the devs did. I feel like they're so undercredited with so much stuff, and playing some of those instances is really good for freshening me up and getting me excited about what they're capable of doing with End of Dragons 2, because they really did do some good stuff, even if there's the odd hole or gap in the world building the lore that doesn't really make too much sense. I was thrilled playing this, and not in small part due to the fact I actually cranked the graphics up. So, weird side tangent, if you guys remember, towards the end of last year, I had some plans, particularly with some non-Guild Wars 2 series, but as soon as I was shooting them, my PC started crashing. And in fact, to this day, it still is. I've got some kind of heatsink issue, I guess. I thought it was the power supply, but it's probably an overheat thing. In any case, I keep suddenly losing power and the PC shuts off if I stress my PC even slightly. So all of End of Dragons Daily so far has actually been on minimum graphics settings, and I feel kind of bad, because at least for today, if you look in the background, I got some good graphics going for a bit. Then I had to crank it down again, because, yeah, the crashes are still going on. I've had a few comments of people saying, wow, Guild Wars 2 looks really old, blah, 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 especially when we were talking about the idea of a Guild Wars 3. And look, you guys are totally entitled to that opinion, but do temper yourselves a bit if you're basing just off of the footage here. You know, maybe you're not playing too much, but you are watching these, because it's not been as good as it really is. Right, so let's talk about the news. What was it? Well, it's pretty veiled. Essentially, there was a blog post went up on December 18th, right as the studio left over the Christmas period. And the purpose of this blog post was only there, really, to talk a bit about the Icebrood saga and the upcoming release, which we've now experienced, to talk about some of the streams that were going on over that period of time, and that's about it. However, they had screenshots related to End of Dragons, or I shouldn't say screenshots, they had concept art related to End of Dragons, and they had a cryptic little message right at the end of the post, you guys can see it here, where they say the end of the year marks the beginning of a new cycle, and we can't wait to show you what the future holds. And the idea, you know, the End of Dragons, we're breaking the cycle, we're turning the wheel, we're going to a new phase, a new era. You know, that's all very in keeping with what the expansion's about. This comment actually reminds me a little bit of what Ruby said on the forums a while ago. And I actually fished this up and posted it earlier today. I'll throw it in the video for you guys, because this is a really important quote. We've talked circles around it a lot lately, especially with respect to the idea of moving to a Guild Wars 3. People are constantly asking me about that now. I even had quite an aggressive, like arrogantly toned message from someone yesterday saying it's ridiculous to ever suggest something because the devs proved Guild Wars 2 will go on. Well, look, guys, this is what was said. It was a comment on a forum from Ruby. And so the community said, after we heard the title, End of Dragons, does this mean after this expansion it's over, that the story is done? And Ruby said, no, this does not mean the end of the story. I'm not going to give you spoilers, but all of our Living World seasons have been building towards this. We've been working out on this for a long time. In the meantime, we're having lots of fun reading all your ideas about where the story is headed. Speculate away. So let's not forget exactly how this is worded and what is said. All she's confirmed here really is that the story goes on. And I don't want to turn this into a massive tangent again, but the story can go on in any number of ways, formats, products, right? So let's just bear this in mind. As far as I know, there's nothing else the studio said to answer this question of why it's called End of Dragons and what their true, intentions are. If I have missed something, drop it down in the comment and let me know. Back to the blog post, as I mentioned, it was talking about some of the streams. What they had done towards the end of the year was host an Extra Life donation fund and generated $150,000 for Extra Life 2020. Pretty great. And they had a big live stream where they had shown some concept art off for the expansion. And on the stream, it was kind of low resolution, obviously. It had been hosted through Twitch and YouTube streaming or whatever. And on this post, therefore, they gave us the full resolution editions of that art. The art is interesting just for what it depicts. We have scarce images and ideas of the expansion so far. But also, they were very careful about the title of the art. See, in the past, it's occurred that you could download some art off of an official source, and it would have like a weird title. I don't want to say a spoilery or incriminating title, but the devs never thought about the file names much. For this occasion, they really did think about the file names, and they knew we'd look at it, and so you get this extra little thing to wonder about. So let's look through the goodies. One of the images we've actually kind of already talked about. You'll see in a second. Opening up, we have this image. It's clearly of Xingji. Probably the monastery itself, I would say. I mean, it could be Saitung. This is essentially the tutorial island for the Canthan region of the world. To those newcomers to the series, people who don't know this. This is like where you created a level 1 character that was Canthan. They would start the game, they would start the adventure here. That seems to be the idea. Those mountains in the background may even be the same mountain range that's being depicted in the recent fractal. The title of this piece is I Know You, and Yet I Don't. Which is very strange. Maybe there's a suggestion there that this area of the world will feel familiar, but is fundamentally different, Maybe that's just like a comment to the line that they have to walk whenever they do this stuff. Whenever they retread old material, they want to shake it up, they want to change it a bit, so it should be recognizable, but not too recognizable. That's my interpretation there. Maybe it's something much more direct, and once the expansion itself is out, we'll know what that message is really alluding to. Not much more to say here. As a sidebar, you've probably already seen this, because I'm using it as the thumbnails for the videos at the moment. If you saw the video on your feed, it was actually this image that I've started using. I know the thumbnails aren't that good. Look, if any of you guys have a better idea for an End of Dragons daily thumbnail I can use, send it in, and I probably will use it. I'm rubbish at that stuff. Next, we have this amazing image of the Echo Vowed Forest. So I kind of wanted to see an image for each region. We won't find one of Kaineng, and we won't find one of the Jade Sea, just as a heads up. But we do get Echo Vowed here, which is so fascinating to me. For years, a member of the community whose stream was actually advertised on this blog post, Vasberg, has been doing this incredible art of Echo Vowed. And looking back at the Guild Wars 1 Echo Vowed concept art, it's some of my favorite stuff that they've ever produced. It's really grim and haunting and echoey. Here we see a first little taste of Guild Wars 2's interpretation of it. I just can't help but compare it to all this other stuff I've been looking at for years. And the colors here are astounding, because I honestly can't tell at an immediate glance whether that is a petrified forest or not. Now, look, maybe I'm a bit obsessed with this topic. Maybe it doesn't matter. Does it look cool? And it does, then fine, whatever. But that could be a living tree that they've built their cathedrals and their, long sweeping halls. Like, look at that branch there with the massive corridor on the inside. Reminds me a little bit of Hogwarts or something. That could be carved out of stone. Or equally, that could be carved out of, some softer wood material. I don't really know, but the idea of the scale of this forest absolutely seems preserved. I'm so thrilled at the idea of being able to go inside there. Just from an artistry standpoint, I love that I really can't tell. It's sort of ambiguous. Now, in our discussions about whether the sea would melt and stuff like that before, many of you did propose that, just leave it as stone, but have new life, mosses and stuff like that, creeping in over the top. That way you can have your cake and eat it too, and you haven't even really necessarily tampered with the lore or whatever. I think that's a cool idea, and this art seems to exhibit that to a certain extent as well, doesn't it? Look at the greenery there. It almost looks like it's new life that's just started growing on top of the old structure of the core tree. But yeah, this is going to be amazing. Thinking about the craftsmen that built that stuff. We talked a lot about how much the Norn have in common with the Luxons before. But Guild Wars 2 added kind of another thing to the Norn, and that's that they're these master builders. Look at the size of the stuff that they built around Holbrak, for example. So I also see a great pairing of Norn and the people of the forest, the Kurziks, in that they could marvel at one another's architecture. Like, these places are just so big and incredible. This picture as well has a great name. It's called A Song Half Remembered. Now again, just like before, that might have some deeper meaning we can't construe just yet. It will be once the expansion's out, we'll know. But what this just makes me think of straight away is how the Kurziks loved to sing, and they had their anthems. You know, before even the Paragon came into Guild Wars 1, there was already this rich idea of these people who, you know, had these chants, and they would echo through the stony halls, and you'd get these beautiful reverberations and stuff. Stuff that only existed in world building because there wasn't really much voice acting in Guild Wars 1, but it was there and compelling. So seeing that they've titled this A Song Half Remembered is quite exciting to me. Seeing what they do with that aspect of the Kurziks could be amazing, because I don't know, who looks back at Thunderhead Keep and the audio that they had in that release and think that ArenaNet didn't do an astounding job? We might get a lot more of that Thunderhead Keep kind of stuff, that exact vibe right here. I love it. This next image is what we've kind of already talked about. Now, I'm confused. I thought this got pulled from the original trailer. Maybe I need to go back and watch it. But this was what we talked about with the Aetherblade hint. The Aetherblade logo apparently on one of these ships. To be honest with you, at first glance, I can't see it too easily. But yeah, this piece is called An Echo in the Mists. The Aetherblades, as we already discussed a lot in some of the recent videos, were out in the mists, tasked about some weird thing by Scarlet there. And so then this extra little screenshot coming right out towards the end of the year, sort of affirmation that there is going to be stuff to do with the Aetherblades in the mists, is all very cool. It's a shame that we never got a small glimpse at them somehow when we were traveling in the mists hunting Kralkatorrik at the end of the last season, but hey. And that leaves us with just one more screenshot, and this one's probably the most interesting. This is what I tweeted about, and we had a lot of discussion. It's called A Promised Future, and it depicts some character. A character we've never seen, as far as I know, in some kind of weird trance-like magical state, doing whatever it is. So how is this person a promised future? You know, so much of everything at the moment with the end of Dragons and wondering about the future of the franchise is questioning what the hell the future's going to be. And then they give us this screenshot of just someone completely out of left field. So I was really stumped when I saw this. I had no idea who this was or why we were getting this character early. The fact that they're showing this character so soon makes me think that they must have a big part of the expansion. They must be core to some of the story here. So who is it? And the only real idea I had off the top of my head was that it was somehow someone related to Mytrin. I thought maybe it could be a daughter of Mytrin's or something, you know, maybe since we last saw her. Her off-screen adolescent daughter is now coming into the scene a bit more. But I mean, that's really not that exciting. Meanwhile, you guys were way more inspired. You went completely wild. Let's run through some of the responses. Tulip said, wishful thinking that she's somehow related to the Fractal. So possibly, yeah, this could be another depiction of one of those characters at another time. If the Fractal is super core to the actual plot we'll get in End of Dragons, that'd be nice. I kind of feel like, though, the Fractal is an ancillary story. It's just something a little bit extra. Maybe thematically it's close, but I don't think the specifics of that Fractal are going to end up integral to the expansion story. That's just what I have in my gut. And this character, I'm guessing, is integral to the expansion story. So it's a great idea. I just don't know if I'm 100% on board. Kosluftar said, isn't it Mytrin? Just with a new hairstyle, so Mytrin herself. Doesn't the shape of her face look totally different? I mean, to be honest with you, I can't really remember that well how Mytrin looked in the past, but this feels like a very different design. It is kind of the studio's MO, though. You know how, like, Casimir gets a different hairstyle and a different outfit each expansion and so on? So maybe they do the same with Mytrin. Maybe they don't feel obligated to sticking with a character design that was done years ago in Season 1, and they want to upgrade it a bit. In which case, if it is Mytrin, the much more interesting question is, what's going on with her in this weird trance-like state? That weird, like, pose she's in really reminds me of when we were in Omad's machine. Don't you guys think? But pay attention to the fact that there's like watery elements around the outside here. There's bubbles and stuff. And we are going into an expansion that seems heavily water themed. Some kind of dragon connection, I'm guessing. In one way, I kind of love the idea that this is Mytrin. You know, it's titled A Promised Future, and she's clearly therefore going to have a huge part of the future of the franchise and a core role in the expansion. And I like the thought of Mytrin being in that position. I always thought it was a great idea to introduce this character all this time ago. She becomes a mystery off screen and then steps forward in a big way. Another great idea from Tim here I hadn't thought of. It doesn't lend to a very exciting world, but it might be true. Could it not just be their representation of the Pact Commander? Just like in Path of Fire, they had a male Alolan as the commander in a lot of promos. So I do kind of believe this. I do think that they'll update the stand-in character. What they're talking about is when you watch a trailer or something, how does the studio know if you're playing a Norn or a Sylvaria or whatever? They just tend to use a generic kind of stand-in. And when it became Path of Fire, they changed the stand-in. I think they did for one of the Living World seasons as well. And I would expect, yes, they would change it to someone more ethnically associated with the region of the world we're going to, just as they did with POF. So maybe that's us. And that's us in a weird magical state. And in that situation, we don't have to, you know, wonder why we're in a weird magical state, because the story revolves around us. The commander always does the cool things. And so, you know, clearly it would just be a moment in the story. I also think it's very likely, what's the phrase they use? Gender flip? I think it's very likely that they will gender flip the stand-in, because as far as I remember, for like a whole decade of Guild Wars 2, it's always been a male character. They probably want to shake that up at some point. More inspiration from Alonso here, with the commander being Aureen's champion, Ryland being Jormag's, Bram hinting that he might be Primordus's. Looking at her attire and posture, that transmits some kind of importance and all the bubbles. Maybe she's the Deep Sea Dragon champion. I actually find this very plausible. Even if only that what they might be setting up long term is that we're going to eliminate the dragons, but all the champions will now be like the vessels of strength or whatever. And now we have more interesting antagonists because they're kind of packaged in these smaller, more nefarious bodies or whatever. That would definitely be a whole new phase for the franchise and for the storytelling. Also, with the new idea on the table that Icebrood Saga might end without any dragon kills. The thought might be that they're gearing up for some massive battle royale with lots of dragons and lots of dragon champions all at once. So she could be the third big player and she might, you know, have a large role in this expansion. Just like how, you know, Vlast really didn't have anything to do or say until POF came around, and then he took a front seat during POF. Even though a lot of it was posthumous, you might see a similar thing for her. I could buy that. GVLS Doom says, couldn't say who it is, but all those jade adornments seem pretty deliberate. Perhaps a Luxon. Yeah, if you guys look carefully at the clothes, there's lots of jade on there. That wasn't something I'd really noticed until people started talking about it. I don't really think it's too Luxon, and I did have a couple of other tweets where people said, it might not be a Luxon thing. The Luxon clothes were kind of very, very iconic, I think, and I hope we do see more of that. I think she's more of a city dweller, if anything. If not an Aetherblade. I mean, it's not Aetherbladey attire either. Now, that's another point to make about the whole Mytrin stuff. Aetherblades were very obvious in the kind of clothes that they wore and, you know, the electrical side of it and the mechanical, metallic elements. This looks like a native Canthan to me in a lot of ways. Now, there may still be a relation. There might be a relation to Marjorie or whatever too, but it feels very native. I think she's been there a long time. I think by now, a lot of the jade has been mined and has been distributed. We know it was a sought-after material and been incorporated into various people's clothes and stuff. So I think it's a pretty good observation. 4 more, and I'm going to have to cut some of these tweets out. We're running out of time here. Honestly, you guys had so many good observations. Jan says, specifically on this live stream, Ruby seemed to imply that it was an unknown character. So it's probably not the Pact Commander. Now, that would actually change a lot of our observations. I don't know how concrete it is if they're only seeming to imply it might be a new character. But information to definitely remember. Lucky says, I'd guess it's either a descendant of Menlo or Togo, maybe? Well, even though I like the idea, I doubt it's a descendant of Menlo. Wasn't it established that Menlo lived out the rest of his days up in Corteria? Where's his grave again? But as for Togo, now that's an interesting idea. That would also give this person royal blood. And I've been wondering if the devs are going to play with this idea of having an Empress instead of just emperors. You know, I can very much imagine, and I know some of you guys will scoff at this, to me it's all about the execution rather than the concept. I can kind of imagine that they overthrow the emperor to do away his xenophobia and so on, and instill like an empress there instead, and end the years of the patriarchy in Cantha. I could very much imagine that's a story they might go with, and in which case this character having royal blood because she's a descendant of Togo, I could see all of that, really. I mean, maybe bookmark this one. We'll see in a year whether we're right on that. It's an interesting idea. Mr. Middle says, you remember the Miku storyline during Guild Wars Beyond? Could be a descendant. This is actually probably my favorite idea just because it makes the Guild Wars Beyond story more relevant. I do want to see as much fallout from that and the Ministry of Purity and so on as possible. And then finally, we have Kurodax, sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong, who's completely wild. Now, this is my kind of guy. Listen to this. Alternate or crazier theory. We still don't know if anyone replaced Balthazar as one of the 6 gods. Maybe the next human to ascend will be the one to bridge the gap between mortals and dragons. Now that's truly wild. The idea of who joins the pantheon after Balthazar got chained up is an amazing topic. A topic that doesn't come up enough. It doesn't come up enough because all of that happened off screen. I think people really get confused about what we were dealing with when we were dealing with Balthazar in POF. Like, he'd already lost most of his power at that point. We were basically dealing with the Bloodstone. There is this whole idea of a gap in the Pantheon that I'd love to talk about at a later date. I don't know whether End of Dragons will do it. And the idea that someone might ascend in this expansion and become a bridge between mortals and dragons, I actually think that's amazing. I think the Commander could do that, though. I think that they could do something like that and tie it in with Wayno Su. I see all kinds of opportunities there. Oh, man. Imagine how fun it would be to be in the writer's room, like, concepting this stuff out for this expansion. They could go in so many directions. And you guys are just sort of tapping into some of them there. So there you have it, guys. That's kind of a little bit of news, really, for you all in the End of Dragons format. This is how I intend to talk about the expansion going forward for the vast majority of the time. So I really hope you guys like this. And it's just one part of a series, so please don't let it get buried. Do tell people about it if you like. I'm still watching the views kind of steadily and warily, and we'll see where we're going. So thank you all. Big day tomorrow as well, if all goes according to plan, because I'm about to introduce another new series to you guys, which I've been mulling over for a long time. So thank you all. I'll see you there, and have a good evening, everybody. Thanks so much for spending a little bit of it with me. I really value that an incredible amount. Take it easy, and I'll see you tomorrow.